James Kessler's hand shot out and grabbed Emily Watson's uniform skirt, yanking her toward him. "Women like you should be grateful," the tech billionaire murmured. His casual assault and dismissive laughter when she slapped his hand away revealed everything. What the tech CEO couldn't see was the methodical intelligence behind Emily Watson's controlled fury. When he threatened her job, assuming wealth guaranteed silence, he'd already made his fatal error. 3 days later, as his empire crumbled, and FBI agents surrounded his private jet, Kessler would finally understand the true cost of underestimating a woman who refused to stay quiet. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The grandfather clock in the marble lobby of Aspen Heights Resort chimed 11 times. As Emily Watson pushed her cart down the dimly lit hallway of the East Wing, 12 years of cleaning luxury hotels had taught her to move like a ghost. Silent wheels, measured steps, eyes that noticed everything. The Turkish rugs beneath her feet probably cost more than she made in 6 months. But she'd learned long ago not to dwell on such things. "Evening, Ms. Watson." "Night." Security guard Carla Ruiz nodded from her station near the elevator bank. "Quiet night, Carla." "Rich folks are all tucked in, counting their money in their sleep." Carla's grin faded as she glanced at her monitors. "Camera in the East Corridor's been acting up again. 3rd time this month." Emily paused, studying Carla's concerned expression. "Same camera?" "Yeah, manager says maintenance is looking into it." Carla's air quotes conveyed exactly what she thought of that explanation. Emily filed the information away and continued towards Suite 237, James Kessler's room. The tech CEO had arrived 3 days ago for his monthly week-long stay, and his suite required the full treatment. Egyptian cotton sheets changed daily, marble surfaces polished to perfection, fresh orchids arranged just so. His assistant had emailed specific instructions: spring water bottles aligned precisely, towels folded in thirds, not halves. She knocked softly. "Housekeeping." No response. The suite's lights were off, and she'd seen Kessler head to the spa an hour ago for his evening massage. Plenty of time to clean and restock. The suite sprawled across 1,500 square feet of mountain views and imported furnishings. Emily worked methodically, muscle memory guiding her hands, while her mind wandered to Sarah's excited chatter at dinner about her niece's college acceptance letter. Sarah Lopez had been her roommate for 2 years, and their friendship was one of the few bright spots in the isolation of resort life. 40 minutes later, Emily emerged from Suite 237 with her cart fully loaded with soiled linens. The linen closet sat at the corridor's far end, tucked behind a service alcove that kept it invisible from guest areas. She'd just begun sorting towels when footsteps echoed behind her. Well, working late again, I see." Emily turned to find James Kessler leaning against the alcove entrance, blocking her exit. His spa robe hung loose, revealing the pale, soft chest of a man who'd never worked with his hands. His eyes held a predatory gleam she'd seen before in men who confused wealth with permission. "Mr. Kessler, I was just finishing your suite. Everything should be perfect now." "Perfect?" He stepped closer, trapping her between the linen shelves and his advancing form. "You know what would be perfect? If women like you understood how good you have it here." The smell of eucalyptus oil from his massage couldn't mask something darker underneath. The scent of entitlement gone rancid. Emily pressed back against the shelves, her training warring with instinct. Smile. Be accommodating. The customer is always right. But when his hand shot out and grabbed her uniform skirt, yanking her toward him, training shattered. "Women like you should be grateful," he murmured, his breath hot against her ear. "Very grateful for the opportunities I provide." His other hand moved toward her waist, fingers already claiming territory that wasn't his to take. The casual assumption in his touch that her body existed for his pleasure ignited something primal in Emily's chest. Her palm cracked across his knuckles with a sound like a branch snapping. "Don't touch me." The words came out steady, controlled, but her heart hammered against her ribs. Kessler stumbled backward, more surprised than hurt, staring at his reddened hand as if he couldn't process what had just happened. Then he laughed. The sound echoed off the narrow walls, rich, amused, utterly without shame. He straightened his robe and smoothed his thinning hair, his expression shifting from predatory to patronizing, feisty. I like that. He examined his knuckles with detached interest. But you might want to think carefully about your attitude, sweetheart. Jobs like yours aren't exactly growing on trees these days. He turned and strolled away, hands clasped behind his back, whistling a tuneless melody that faded as he disappeared around the corner. As if nothing had happened. As if she were nothing. Emily remained frozen between the linen shelves, her whole body vibrating with suppressed rage. The grandfather clock's distant chiming marked midnight, but time felt suspended. In the fluorescent-lit alcove, her mind cataloged details with crystalline clarity. The wet spot on his robe from the massage oil, the way he'd favored his left knee walking away, the complete absence of fear in his voice when he'd threatened her job. She picked up a fallen towel with hands that didn't shake, folded it with mechanical precision, and placed it on the proper shelf. Then she gathered her supplies, locked the linen closet, and wheeled her cart toward the service elevator. But as the elevator descended, toward the staff quarters, one thought burned bright and clear in her mind. James Kessler had made a serious miscalculation. He'd assumed she would be grateful. He'd assumed wrong. In the staff quarters, Emily stared at the ceiling of her shared room. Sarah's soft snoring was the only sound in the pre-dawn darkness. 3 hours had passed since the incident, but sleep remained elusive. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt Kessler's hand on her skirt, heard his casual threat about her job. "Emily?" Sarah's voice cut through the silence. "You okay? You've been tossing around all night." "Just thinking." Sarah sat up, her silhouette outlined by the security light filtering through their small window. "About what? And don't say nothing." I know that look. Emily had always been the steady one in their friendship, the voice of reason when Sarah's temper flared over rude guests or unfair scheduling. But now, sitting in the darkness, she felt something crack inside her careful composure. What would you do if a guest, crossed a line with you? Depends on the line. Sarah's voice sharpened. What happened? The words came slowly, at first, then in a rush. Sarah listened without interruption, her breathing growing more ragged with each detail. When Emily finished, Sarah was fully alert, anger radiating from her small frame. "That piece of—" Sarah caught herself. "You have to report this today." "To who? Peterson? You think he'll choose my word over a billionaire's?" "Then we make him choose. This is serious, Emily. You can't just let this go." But even as Sarah spoke with conviction, they both knew the reality. Aspen Heights survived on discretion and the happiness of wealthy guests. Staff members who caused problems didn't last long, regardless of the circumstances. At 8:30 sharp, Emily stood outside. Robert Peterson's office, her incident report typed and printed on resort letterhead. She'd chosen her words carefully, sticking to facts, avoiding emotional language that might give Peterson an excuse to dismiss her concerns. "Come in." Peterson didn't look up from his computer screen as she entered. His office reflected the resort's aesthetic. Leather furniture, mountain views, a wet bar that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Mr. Peterson, I need to file a formal complaint about an incident last night." That got his attention. His pale eyes flicked from the screen to her face, already calculating. What kind of incident? She handed him the report and watched his expression shift from mild annoyance to careful neutrality as he read. When he finished, he set the paper aside and leaned back in his chair. "This is concerning, Emily. Very concerning." His voice carried the practiced sympathy of a man who'd handled similar situations before. "But I have to ask, Are you absolutely certain about these accusations? I'm certain about what happened to me, sir. Of course, I'm not questioning your perception of events, but Mr. Kessler is a valued guest, and accusations like these, he spread his hands helplessly, they can be devastating to a man's reputation. What about my reputation? What about my safety? Peterson's smile tightened. Your safety is our top priority, naturally. But we need to be practical here. These situations often come down to one person's word against another's. And frankly, guests like Mr. Kessler bring significant revenue to this resort. The careful phrasing didn't disguise the threat. Emily felt the familiar weight of institutional power pressing down on her, the same force that had silenced other women in other hotels, other jobs, other lives. I'd like to review the security footage, she said. Peterson shook his head with what appeared to be genuine regret. I'm afraid that's not possible. The camera in that corridor has been malfunctioning. Has been for weeks, actually. Maintenance. Keep saying they'll fix it, but you know how these things go. How convenient. Excuse me. Nothing, sir. What happens now? Peterson picked up a report and slid it into his desk drawer with the finality of a closing coffin. I'll speak with Mr. Kessler privately. Get his side of the story. In the meantime, I'd suggest you keep this between us. False accusations can have serious consequences for your employment here. The dismissal was clear, but Emily remained seated. And if he does it again, to me or someone else, that won't happen. Peterson's tone carried absolute certainty. Mr. Kessler is a gentleman. I'm sure this was simply a misunderstanding. Meanwhile, 3 floors above, in Suite 237, James Kessler reviewed his morning emails over room service. Coffee. His Hermes briefcase sat open beside him, tablet displaying stock prices that fluctuated like a heartbeat. Synapse Technologies had closed up 3% yesterday, another victory in his unbroken string of successes. His phone buzzed with a text from his assistant. Board meeting moved to 2 p.m. Carter Industries acquisition documents attached. He swiped the message away without reading the attachments. Details bored him. He paid people to handle details while he focused on the bigger picture. The next acquisition, the next product launch, the next billion-dollar milestone. The incident with the housekeeper flickered through his mind like a briefly interesting commercial. What was her name? Emily something. Pretty enough, with that defiant spark in her eyes when she'd slapped his hand. He'd always been drawn to women with spirit. It made breaking them more satisfying. His phone rang. Peterson. James, I hope I'm not disturbing you. Never a disturbance, Bob. What's on your mind? We had a small situation last night. One of our housekeeping staff filed a complaint about an alleged incident with you. Kessler's grip on his coffee cup didn't waver. Alleged incident? She claims you made advances. Inappropriate touching, that sort of thing. Kessler sat down his cup and walked to the window, gazing out at the mountains with the bored interest of a man who owned similar views in 6 different states. That's unfortunate. Clearly a misunderstanding. Absolutely. I told her as much. The whole thing is nonsense. Of course, she's been having some personal issues lately, hasn't she? Financial stress, relationship problems. Sometimes that kind of pressure can make people imagine things. Poor girl. I hope she gets the help she needs. I'm sure she will. In any case, I wanted you to know we're handling it internally. Nothing for you to worry about. I appreciate your discretion. Bob, it's why I keep coming back to Aspen Heights. Our pleasure, James. Enjoy the rest of your stay. Kessler ended the call and returned to his emails. Problem solved. Crisis averted. The little housekeeper would learn to keep her mouth shut, or she'd find herself looking for work elsewhere. Either way, it was no longer his concern. But as he scrolled through his messages, one nagging thought persisted. The way she'd looked at him in that corridor, not with fear or submission, but with calculation, as if she were memorizing details for some future purpose. He shook off the feeling. What could a housekeeper possibly do to someone like him? Back in the staff quarters, Emily sat on her narrow bed, staring at the wall. Sarah had left for her shift an hour ago, but her words echoed in the small room. Don't let them win. The official channels had failed, just as she'd expected. Peterson's drawer had swallowed her complaint like quicksand, and the broken camera story was so obviously fabricated, it insulted her intelligence. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed she would give up. Emily opened her laptop and began researching James Kessler. If the system wouldn't protect her, she'd have to protect herself. And sometimes protection required knowing your enemy better than he knew himself. Emily's research consumed the next 48 hours. Between shifts, she compiled everything she could find about James Kessler, his routines, his business dealings, his public appearances. The man kept a predictable schedule. Morning workout at 6, breakfast in his suite at 7:30, spa treatments every other day at 9 p.m. He was a creature of habit, and habits could be exploited. On her third night of observation, she positioned herself in the service corridor during his evening routine. Through the crack in the maintenance door, she watched him punch his room code into the electronic lock, 7418. His fingers moved slowly, deliberately, the practiced motion of someone who'd used the same combination for years. What are you doing? Emily spun to find Carla approaching with a steaming cup of coffee and a concerned expression. Just checking the supply closet inventory. Carla's eyes narrowed as she glanced at the crack in the door, then back at Emily. At 10:30 at night? In the dark? There was no point lying to someone who spent her nights watching security monitors. Carla had probably seen her lurking in corridors for days. I'm watching him, Emily said quietly. The tech guy. The one who… Carla's voice trailed off, but her expression hardened. Peterson shut you down, didn't he? Completely. Drawer filed under problems that don't exist. Carla leaned against the wall, studying Emily's face in the dim corridor lighting. My ex-husband used to say, the system only works for people who built it. Everyone else has to find their own. Justice. Sounds like a smart man. Smart enough to leave me for his secretary. Carla's bitter laugh echoed softly. But he wasn't wrong about the system part. You planning something? Emily met her gaze steadily. I'm planning to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. Carla nodded slowly, as if she'd been expecting this answer. That camera that keeps malfunctioning? The one in the East Corridor? Funny thing about security systems, sometimes they malfunction right before important guests arrive. Almost like someone doesn't want certain activities recorded. Carla's voice dropped to a whisper. But the main server backs everything up automatically, even the malfunctioned footage. The implication hung between them like a live wire. Emily felt her pulse quicken. Where's the main server? Security, office, behind 3 locked doors and a biometric scanner. Carla paused. Of course, if someone happened to be in there legitimately, say, filing a report about suspicious activity, they might accidentally see things. Before Emily could respond, Carla handed her the coffee cup and walked away, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. But she called back over her shoulder. Shift change is at 6 a.m. Takes about 10 minutes for the new guy to get his bearings. The next morning, Emily arrived at the security office at exactly 6:05 with a typed report about unusual guest behavior, patterns that needed to be documented. The new guard, barely out of his teens and clearly overwhelmed by the bank of monitors, waved her toward the filing cabinets without looking up. The server terminal sat in the corner, protected by a login screen that demanded Carla's credentials. But Carla had left a sticky note on her keyboard. Password, Aspen Ridge, 2024. Emily's fingers flew across the keys, navigating to the archived footage from 3 nights ago. The East Corridor camera showed perfect clarity until 10:47 p.m. when the feed mysteriously cut to static. But the backup files told a different story. There she was, sorting linens in the alcove. There was Kessler, approaching, trapping her against the shelves, his hands grabbing her skirt, her defensive slap, his casual laugh as he walked away. Every detail captured in high definition. She copied the file to a flash drive and deleted her access logs, her heart hammering as the new guard shuffled papers behind her. When she finally left the security office, the evidence of Kessler's assault was safely tucked in her uniform pocket. But as she walked toward the staff elevator, she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. "Happened again last night," Sarah was saying to another housekeeper named Maria. "Room service girl, that new one from El Salvador, says he cornered her in the wine cellar." Maria shook her head in disgust. "Same story every time. Rich man thinks he can take whatever he wants." "Did she report it? To who? Peterson? We both know how that story ends." Sarah's voice carried a bitterness Emily had never heard before. "These men, they think we're invisible, like we don't matter." The conversation faded as they entered the elevator, but Emily remained frozen in the corridor. Another victim. Another young woman, too scared to fight back, too vulnerable to risk her job. The security footage in her pocket suddenly felt heavier, weighted with the responsibility of multiple lives. That evening, she used her master key to enter Kessler's suite during his spa appointment. The electronic lock beeped softly, a sound she'd heard thousands of times in her 12 years of service. She had maybe 40 minutes before he returned from his massage. His laptop sat open on the marble desk, but when she tried to access it, a password screen appeared. She tried obvious combinations, his birthday, company name, variations of synapse, but nothing worked. Then she remembered the briefcase. High-end executives often kept backup devices or storage drives for sensitive information. She found it beside his bed, expensive leather with a digital combination lock. The same 4 numbers he'd used for his room, 72418. Inside, beneath contracts and business documents, she discovered a small personal safe built into the briefcase's lining. Another 4-digit code, but this time she had to guess. She tried. His room number, birth year from his public bio, even the resort's founding date. On her 7th attempt, the year his company went public, the safe clicked open. USB drives, multiple drives labeled with years, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, each one containing what appeared to be insurance files, documentation of his various arrangements with accusers. She plugged in her flash drive and began copying everything: NDAs, settlement agreements, financial records, a systematic pattern of harassment and cover-up stretching back years. Hotel staff, company employees, even college interns. Each document represented a life damaged. A voice silenced. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Emily's breath caught as she recognized the sound. Kessler's distinctive, uneven gait. The slight favor of his left knee that she'd noticed the night he'd assaulted her. But he wasn't supposed to return for another 20 minutes. The copying bar showed 87% complete. She couldn't stop it now, couldn't risk losing everything she'd found. The footsteps grew closer, accompanied by the low murmur of a phone conversation. "Told you to handle the Anderson situation quietly," Kessler's voice carried through the door. "I don't pay you to create more problems." Emily grabbed her flash drive and dove into the walk-in closet just as his key card beeped in the lock. The copying bar ticked to 91% as the door swung open. No, Kessler continued into his phone. "The girl has to understand there are consequences for making false accusations. Financial consequences, career consequences, whatever it takes to make the problem disappear." He walked past the closet without glancing inside, settling into his leather armchair with a heavy sigh. Emily crouched behind hanging suits that probably cost more than her annual salary, watching the copying progress crawl forward with agonizing slowness. 94%, 96%. "Listen carefully." Kessler's voice turned ice cold. "I've built this company by eliminating obstacles. People who threaten what I've created don't get second chances. They get destroyed completely. Do you understand? 98%. 99%. Good. Handle it tonight, and make sure there's no trail back to me. The copying completed just as Kessler ended his call. Emily yanked out the flash drive and carefully closed the briefcase, her hands trembling with adrenaline. She had to get out before he noticed anything suspicious. But as she prepared to slip out through the closet's rear service entrance, Kessler's phone rang again. What now? His irritation was palpable. Yes, I'll be down in 5 minutes. The Anderson meeting. Can't wait until morning. His footsteps moved toward the bedroom, presumably to change clothes. Emily seized the moment and slipped out through the suite's service entrance, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd done it. She had evidence, not just of her own assault, but of a systematic pattern of abuse spanning years. Dozens of victims, millions in hush money, a criminal enterprise masquerading as business as usual. But as she hurried toward the staff quarters, Kessler's phone conversation echoed in her mind. Someone named Anderson was about to be handled. Another problem about to be eliminated. She'd gathered the ammunition she needed for justice. Now she had to decide how to use it. Emily spent the next 2 days methodically reviewing the stolen files in the privacy of her shared quarters. Sarah worked double shifts covering for a sick colleague, leaving Emily alone with the damning evidence spread across her laptop screen. What she'd discovered went far beyond sexual harassment. It was a blueprint for systemic abuse of power. The NDAs revealed a pattern spanning 6 years. Rachel Kim, former marketing director at Synapse, settled for $850,000 after reporting Kessler's assault at a company retreat. Maria Alvarez, hotel housekeeper in Miami, received $200,000 to disappear quietly. Jennifer Brooks, college intern, got $75,000 and a recommendation letter to ensure her silence. Dozens of women, their voices purchased and buried. But the most chilling discovery was the problem management folder. Email chains between Kessler and a man identified only as Tank, detailed systematic intimidation campaigns, private investigators, hired to dig up dirt on victims, fabricated evidence planted to discredit accusers. One email casually mentioned vehicular accidents that had befallen particularly persistent victims. Emily's hands shook as she read Tank's latest report. Anderson situation resolved. Subject relocated to Idaho. New identity established. She won't be a problem anymore. The clinical language couldn't disguise what it really meant. Another woman forced into hiding to escape. Kessler's reach. She printed the most damning documents and organized them into a comprehensive folder. Security footage of her own assault, financial records showing hush money payments, email threads proving conspiracy to silence victims, legal documents revealing the scope of his criminal enterprise. On Tuesday evening, she purchased a burner phone with cash from the resort's gift shop. The teenage clerk barely looked up from his video game as she completed the transaction. Back in her room, she prepared the evidence package with surgical precision, documents arranged chronologically, key passages highlighted, a typed summary explaining the scope of Kessler's crimes. At precisely 11 p.m., she slipped the folder under Kessler's door along with the burner phone and a handwritten note. Call me at midnight. Come alone. Meanwhile, 3 floors above, Kessler was reviewing quarterly projections when he noticed the envelope that had been slipped beneath his door. His first thought was room service, perhaps a wine list or spa menu. But the plain manila folder contained something far more dangerous. His own face stared back at him from security footage stills. Screenshots of bank transfers, copies of NDAs he'd thought were safely buried in legal vaults. His personal emails printed in stark black and white, including conversations with Tank about eliminating problems. The blood drained from his face as he flipped through page after page of evidence. Someone had penetrated his most secure files, stolen his most dangerous secrets. But who and how? The burner phone buzzed at exactly midnight. Who is this? His voice cracked despite his attempt to sound commanding. Someone who knows what you really are. Emily's voice was steady, controlled. She'd practiced this conversation a dozen times. Listen, I don't know what game you're playing, but meet me behind the tennis courts in 1 hour. Come alone, or these files go to the FBI, the media, and every board member at Synapse. You don't understand who you're dealing with. I have resources, connections. I can destroy your life with a phone call. James? The use of his first name made him flinch. I've read your files. I know about Rachel Kim, Maria Alvarez, Jennifer Brooks, all of them. Your threats don't scare me anymore. The line went dead. Kessler stared at the phone, his mind racing. This wasn't some opportunistic blackmail scheme. Whoever had done this possessed technical skills, inside knowledge of his security measures, and access to places that should have been impossible to breach. The calm certainty in the caller's voice suggested someone who'd planned this meticulously. Considered calling Tank, but the evidence folder contained enough proof to implicate his security chief in multiple felonies. Involving more people would only create more liability. He had to handle this himself. At 1 a.m., Kessler made his way through the resort's darkened corridors toward the tennis courts. The mountain air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the distant sound of an owl hunting in the forest. Security. Lights cast long shadows across the perfectly manicured grounds. Emily was waiting in the shadows beside the equipment shed, a small figure that seemed to materialize from the darkness itself. She'd chosen this location carefully, far from guest areas, hidden from security cameras, with multiple escape routes if things went wrong. You came, she said. Kessler stopped 10 feet away, trying to project the authority that had made him billions. But standing in the darkness, facing an adversary he couldn't see clearly, his usual confidence felt hollow. What do you want? Money? I can transfer whatever amount you... I want you to listen. Emily stepped into the light, and recognition dawned on his face. The housekeeper, the one who had slapped his hand away 3 nights ago. Do you remember what you said to me in that corridor, about women like me being grateful? His mouth opened and closed wordlessly. I've been thinking about that, about gratitude, about what I should be grateful for. She pulled out a tablet and pressed play. His own voice filled the night air. People who threaten what I've created don't get second chances. They get destroyed. Completely. The blood drained from his face. Where did you get that? From your private files, all of them. 6 years of evidence showing exactly what kind of man you are. She paused the recording. 23 women, James. 23 lives you've damaged or destroyed. Those were business transactions, mutually beneficial arrangements. No crimes were committed. Really? She scrolled to another recording. Let's hear what you told. Tank about Maria Alvarez. His own voice emerged from the tablet speakers. The girl's becoming a problem. Handle it quietly. I don't care how. Just make sure she disappears. Kessler's composure finally cracked. You don't understand the forces you're playing with. I have connections in law enforcement, government, media. This evidence will never see the light of day. That's where you're wrong. Emily's voice remained unnaturally calm. 23 women tried to fight you through official channels. They all failed because they played by rules you wrote. But I'm not playing by your rules anymore. She held up her phone, finger hovering over the screen. Right now, I can send everything to journalists, prosecutors, and your board members. Or you can choose a different path. What do you want? A signed resignation letter from Synapse, a wire transfer of $5 million to an account I'll specify, and a full video confession detailing your crimes against every woman in these files. That's impossible. I won't. Then we're done here. She started to press the screen. Wait. His voice cracked with desperation. Please, there has to be another way. You have 30 seconds to decide. Comply with my demands, or watch your empire burn in real time. Kessler's mind raced through his options. Call Tank? The evidence would implicate them both. Try to grab her phone? She'd already stepped back, maintaining distance. Offer more money? She clearly wasn't motivated by greed. 20 seconds. His shoulders sagged in defeat. What do you need me to sign? Emily smiled coldly and pulled out pre-written documents from her jacket pocket. Everything's already prepared, you just need to make the choice. As Kessler reached for the papers with shaking hands, he realized the quiet housekeeper he'd underestimated had just outmaneuvered him completely, and there was no way out except through her terms. Kessler's hands trembled as he signed the resignation letter in the pale glow of the tennis court security lights. Each stroke of the pen felt like carving his own epitaph. The wire transfer authorization came next. $5 million to an offshore account Emily had established using untraceable cryptocurrency exchanges. Now, the confession, Emily said, holding up her tablet to record. I can't do this. My family, my reputation. Your family will survive without blood money. Your reputation was built on destroying other people's lives. She kept the camera steady. Start with Rachel Kim. The confession took 23 minutes, 1 minute for each victim. Kessler's voice grew hoarse as he detailed assault after assault, cover-up after cover-up. By the time he finished, tears streaked his face, though whether from genuine remorse or self-pity remained unclear. What happens now? He whispered. Now you disappear. Check out tomorrow morning. Don't contact Tank or anyone else who helped you. If I see your name in the news, if you try to rebuild somewhere else, everything goes public. She pocketed the signed documents and walked away, leaving him alone with the weight of his confessions echoing in the mountain air. Back in her shared quarters, Emily's hands shook as adrenaline finally caught up with her. She'd done it. Actually done it. The man who'd assaulted her, who'd destroyed 23 other women's lives, was finished. But as the initial rush of victory faded, stark reality crashed over her like ice water. She was in serious danger. Kessler had connections, resources, and a documented history of making problems disappear permanently. Even broken and defeated, he was still a billionaire with access to people who specialized in violence. Sarah was still at her double shift. Wouldn't return until morning. Perfect. Emily grabbed her emergency duffel bag from under her bed and began stuffing it with essentials. 3 changes of clothes, her laptop, the backup drives containing copies of all evidence, cash she'd been saving for months. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she worked. Every footstep in the corridor made her freeze, listening for sounds of approaching danger. But fear mixed with something else. A wild, intoxicating sense of freedom she'd never experienced before. For 12 years, she'd been invisible, voiceless, powerless. Tonight, she'd brought down a man worth billions, using nothing but intelligence and courage. The quiet housekeeper had just declared war on the entire system that protected predators, like Kessler. She scribbled a quick note for Sarah. Family emergency. Had to leave suddenly. I'll contact you when I can. Thank you for everything. Destroy this note. Her phone buzzed with a bank notification. $5 million had transferred successfully. The money felt surreal, almost meaningless compared to the confession. Video locked on her encrypted drive. That footage was worth more than any amount of cash. It was justice itself. But as she slung the duffel bag over her shoulder, her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? You think this is over? Kessler's voice was barely recognizable, raw, desperate, seething with rage. You have no idea what you've started. James, you need to... My name is Mr. Kessler to you, and you need to understand something. Very clearly. I have friends in places you can't imagine. People who handle problems like you for a living. The line went dead. Emily stared at the phone, her brief moment of triumph evaporating. She'd underestimated his pride, his need for control. The resignation and money weren't enough. He wanted revenge. She grabbed her keys and headed for the service exit, avoiding the main corridors where security cameras might record her departure. The night air felt electric against her skin as she hurried toward the staff parking lot. Every shadow potentially hid danger. Her ancient Honda Civic looked pathetic next to the luxury vehicles scattered throughout the lot, but it was reliable and anonymous. As she threw her bag into the back seat, footsteps echoed from the direction of the main building. Carla appeared, out of the darkness, moving with purpose. Going somewhere? Carla's voice was carefully neutral. Family emergency. Emily's hand hovered near her car door handle, ready to run. At 3 in the morning with everything you own? Carla stepped closer, but her posture remained relaxed. You know, funny thing happened tonight. Our problem guest checked out suddenly. Very suddenly. Emily's heart hammered as she calculated distances to potential escape routes. Carla smiled, grimly. Whatever you did, I hope it was permanent. That man was poison. She pulled a flash drive from her pocket. Security footage from the last week, all of it. Thought you might want this as insurance. Relief flooded through Emily as she accepted the drive. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just stay alive long enough to enjoy whatever justice you carved out tonight. Carla's expression turned serious. And if I were you, I'd get very far away, very quickly. Men like that don't stay down without a fight. Emily nodded and climbed into her car. As the engine turned over, she felt the intoxicating mixture of terror and exhilaration surge through her again. She was driving into the unknown, with $5 million enough evidence to destroy a billionaire and probably a target on her back. But for the first time in her life, she was the one with power. The Honda's headlights cut through the mountain darkness as she drove toward an uncertain but self-determined future. Emily drove through the winding mountain roads for 2 hours before spotting the neon sign of Joe's all-night diner. The parking lot held only a few scattered vehicles, long-haul truckers grabbing coffee, a couple of college kids heading home from late-night parties. Perfect, anonymous, and overlooked. She chose a corner booth near the emergency exit and spread her laptop, tablet, and backup drives across the sticky Formica table. The waitress, a tired-looking woman with graying roots, brought coffee without being asked. Working late, honey? Something like that. Emily forced a smile. Could I get the Wi-Fi password? It's Joe 2024, all one word. You look like you could. Use some pie. Apples fresh. Just coffee for now. Thanks. Alone again, Emily opened her laptop and began the most important work of her life. She'd researched secure server farms during her preparation, identifying 3 different cloud storage companies with servers in countries that didn't cooperate with U.S. law enforcement. Belt and suspenders. If one failed, the others would survive. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she uploaded Kessler's confession video to the first server. The progress bar crawled forward. 15%, 22%, 31%. The diner's Wi-Fi was slower than she'd hoped, but it was working. Come on, she whispered, watching the upload status. At 47%, she started the second upload to a different server. The bell above the diner's entrance chimed as new customers entered. Emily glanced up to see 2 men in dark suits scanning the nearly empty restaurant. They moved with the fluid confidence of people comfortable with violence, their eyes cataloging exits and potential threats. Her blood turned to ice. She forced herself to look back at her laptop screen, trying to appear like any other late-night worker. The first upload hit 63%. The second was at 28%. One of the men approached the counter, while the other positioned himself near the front door. The one at the counter showed something to the waitress, probably a badge or identification. The waitress's friendly demeanor evaporated as she pointed toward Emily's corner booth. 34%. Emily's heart hammered as she opened a third upload.
Window targeting her most secure server. If she could just get one complete copy uploaded before they reached her. Ma'am.
The first man's voice was politely professional as he approached her table. Could we have a word with you outside? I'm sorry. Do I know you? Emily kept typing, starting the third upload. 29% on the primary, 41% on the secondary, 3% on the tertiary. Federal agents, ma'am. We need to speak with you about a matter of national security. The lie was smoothly delivered, but Emily recognized enforcement when she saw it. These weren't FBI agents. They were Kessler's people, probably hired through the same channels that had made Maria Alvarez disappear. Can I see some identification? She needed more time. The uploads were accelerating as the files compressed and transmitted. The man reached into his jacket, but instead of credentials, he produced a small device that looked like a cell phone. "Ma'am, I need you to close the laptop and come with us peacefully." 47%, 52%, 11%. "I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just working on—" "Close it now." The second man had moved from the door to flank her booth, cutting off her escape route to the emergency exit. The handful of other customers seemed oblivious to the tension, lost in their own late-night worlds. 9%, 64%, 18%. "Look, I don't know who you think I am, but—" The first man's patience evaporated. He reached across the table and slammed the laptop shut, cutting off all 3 uploads midstream. Emily's heart sank as months of planning died with the severed connection. "Emily Watson, you're coming with us. We can do this easy or hard. Your choice. I want to call a lawyer. No lawyers, no phone calls, no questions." The second man's voice carried a hint of an accent, Eastern European, maybe Russian. "You took something that doesn't belong to you. Our employer wants it back." They flanked her as she gathered her equipment with trembling hands. The waitress had retreated to the kitchen, probably under orders to forget she'd ever seen this conversation. The few remaining customers studiously avoided eye contact. As they guided her toward the door, Emily calculated her options. The parking lot was dark, isolated. If she was going to run, it had to be now, inside the diner, where witnesses might complicate their plans. "My car won't be necessary." The first man's grip on her arm tightened. "You're traveling with us now." The bell chimed again as they pushed through the door into the cold mountain air. A black SUV idled near the diner's side entrance, windows tinted so dark they seemed to absorb light. "Wait," Emily said, genuine. Panic creeping into her voice. "What about my things, my job? People will look for me." "No, they won't." The Russian smile was cold and certain. "Your roommate received a text from your phone 20 minutes ago. Family emergency. Had to leave suddenly. Don't know when you'll be back." Very convincing. They'd been tracking her phone, probably since Kessler's call, maybe longer. Every move she'd made since leaving the resort had been anticipated, countered, neutralized. The SUV's rear door opened, revealing a third man waiting inside. Marcus "Tank" Thompson. She recognized him from the security photos in Kessler's files, older than his pictures, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades solving problems through violence. "Ms. Watson," Tank's voice was surprisingly gentle. "I apologize for the inconvenience, but we need to have a conversation about recent events. A private conversation. I uploaded everything already. If anything happens to me..." "You uploaded 47% of your primary file and 64% of your secondary before my men terminated the connection." Tank's smile was almost paternal. "Incomplete uploads are automatically deleted by most server systems. Standard security protocol." The knowledge hit her like a physical blow. Hours of work destroyed, her insurance policy worthless. "However," Tank continued, "we're confident you have local copies of the materials in question. Once we retrieve those, we can discuss your future arrangements." They guided her into the SUV with professional efficiency. As the vehicle pulled away from the diner, Emily watched her Honda Civic disappear into the darkness, along with any hope of escape. But as the mountain road unwound before them, one thought burned bright in her mind. Tank was wrong about the uploads. She'd started 3 transfers, not 2. And while the first 2 had failed, that third upload, the one to her most secure server, had been running in the background. 3% when they'd cut the connection. Probably not enough to save her, but maybe enough to ensure that James Kessler's crimes wouldn't die with her. The abandoned warehouse squatted in industrial darkness 20 miles from the resort. Emily found herself zip-tied to a metal chair, her laptop and drives arranged on a folding table like evidence in a trial. Tank sat across from her, studying her face with professional interest. "You're not what I expected," he said. "Kessler described you as some hysterical housekeeper. But this," he gestured at her equipment, "this took planning. Intelligence. What do you want? Passwords, file locations, every copy you made of Mr. Kessler's private materials." Tank's voice remained conversational. "We can do this professionally, or we can make it unpleasant." Emily tested her restraints. The zip ties bit into her wrists, but they weren't cutting off circulation. Yet. Those files document crimes. Dozens of women. Those files document private business arrangements between consenting adults. Tank leaned forward. Nothing more. Rachel Kim was 18 when he assaulted her. Rachel Kim signed a legal agreement, acknowledging that no assault occurred. Tank's patience seemed genuine, which somehow made him more frightening. "Now, the passwords." "No." Tank nodded to one of his men, who stepped forward with a small device that looked like a modified taser. "Ms. Watson, you're operating under a fundamental misunderstanding. You think this is about justice, right and wrong, protecting victims. But it's simpler than that." The device hummed to life, electricity crackling between its prongs. "This is about property. Mr. Kessler owns those files, just like he owns his house, his cars, his company. You stole his property. We're here to retrieve it. And if I don't cooperate, then we'll get the passwords anyway, and you'll have suffered unnecessarily." Tank's expression remained mild. "I've been doing this for 23 years. Everyone breaks eventually. The only question is how much damage you accumulate first." Emily stared at the electric device, her mind racing. She thought about Sarah, probably discovering her note by now. About Carla, who'd risked her own job to help. About 23 women whose voices had been purchased and buried. "The confession video," she said quietly. "Even if you destroy everything, else that video exists. Mr. Kessler was coerced under duress. Any confession obtained through blackmail is inadmissible in court and worthless to media outlets." Tank smiled. "His lawyers are already preparing defamation suits against anyone who attempts to publish it." The casual confidence in his voice was more terrifying than any threat. This wasn't improvisation. They'd planned for every contingency, anticipated every move she might make. "Besides," Tank continued, "by morning, there won't be anyone left to publish anything." The implication hit her like ice water. "You're going to kill me." "That depends entirely on your cooperation. Passwords first, then we discuss your future." Meanwhile, 50 miles away at Aspen Heights, Sarah stood in their shared quarters, holding Emily's hastily scribbled note. Something felt wrong. Not just the sudden departure, but the careful way her roommate had packed. Emily never left anything to chance. Yet she'd abandoned half her belongings. Sarah pulled out her phone and dialed Emily's number. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. Growing unease pushed Sarah toward the security office, where she found Carla reviewing the previous night's footage with unusual intensity. "Have you seen Emily?" Sarah asked. Carla looked up, her expression troubled. "She left early this morning. Said it was a family emergency." "What kind of emergency?" "She would have told me if something was wrong with her family." "I don't know." But Carla paused, studying Sarah's worried face. "There's something else. That tech guest, Kessler. He left suddenly, too, right after having some kind of confrontation." "Confrontation with who?" Carla's silence was answer enough. Sarah sank into a chair as the pieces clicked together. Emily's strange behavior, her sleepless nights, her questions about reporting guest misconduct, the way she'd been watching and planning. "She went after him, didn't she?" Sarah whispered. "I think she did something that needed doing," Carla said carefully. "But now I'm worried she might be in over her head." Back in the warehouse, Tank's patience was wearing thin. The taser had been used twice, leaving Emily's muscles cramping and her vision blurred, but she hadn't broken. "This is pointless," he told his men. "She's tougher than expected." "Want me to increase the voltage?" The operator's eagerness was disturbing. "No, get Kessler on the phone. Let him decide how far he wants to push this." As Tank stepped away to make the call, Emily focused on breathing through the pain. Her body screamed, but her mind remained clear. She thought about the partial upload at the diner. 3% of a confession video probably wasn't enough to destroy Kessler, but it might be enough to raise questions. Tank returned with his phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, sir. She's being difficult. I understand. Are you certain?" "Yes, sir." He ended the call and looked at Emily with something approaching regret. "Mr. Kessler has decided that your cooperation is no longer necessary. We'll extract the passwords from your devices using other methods." "And me?" Tank's expression answered before his words did. "You've caused significant problems for a very powerful man. Those problems require permanent solutions." But as his men prepared for the final phase of their work, none of them noticed the small LED light blinking on Emily's laptop, indicating that a background process was still running, still uploading, still fighting to ensure that some fragment of truth would survive. Tank stepped outside the warehouse to coordinate with his team, while his men maintained watch over Emily. Through the grimy windows, she could see him pacing in the parking lot, speaking rapidly into his phone. Whatever Kessler was telling him was making him agitated. "Boss wants us to clean this up fast," one of the guards muttered to his partner. "Says the situation's getting complicated." Emily tested her restraints again, feeling the zip ties bite deeper into her wrists. The blinking LED on her laptop continued its steady rhythm. "Upload still in progress. If she could just buy more time." "How long have you worked?" "For him?" she asked the nearest guard. "Shut up. I'm just curious. Does the money make it worth it, knowing what kind of man you're protecting?" The guard's hand moved toward his weapon. "I said shut up," Tank returned, his face grim. "Change of plans. We're moving her." "Moving her where?" the second guard asked. "Kessler's private jet is fueled and ready. He wants this handled offshore, away from any potential witnesses or investigations." Emily's blood turned to ice. Once they got her on that plane, she'd disappear completely. No body, no evidence, no trace. "You can't just kidnap people and fly them out of the country," she said, fighting to keep the desperation from her voice. Tank laughed. "Ms. Watson, you still don't understand who you're dealing with. James Kessler owns senators, judges, airport, security chiefs. His plane could be carrying nuclear weapons and nobody would ask questions." Meanwhile, at Aspen Heights, Sarah had convinced Carla to help her access Emily's computer logs from the previous week. What they found made both women sick. "She was researching him," Sarah whispered, scrolling through browser histories. "Everything. About his background, his business, his legal troubles." Carla pointed at the screen. "Look at this. She accessed the security server yesterday morning, downloaded something. The footage has to be..." She got proof of whatever he did to her. Sarah stood up, pacing the small security office. "So she confronted him with evidence, and now they're both gone. That's not a coincidence." Carla was already pulling up external security cameras, the ones that monitored the resort's perimeter and access roads. If something happened to her, there might be traces. They scrolled through hours of footage until Carla froze the image. There, 3:15 a.m., black SUV leaving the mountain road that leads to Joe's diner. "How do you know she went to the diner?" "Because that's where I'd go if I needed fast internet and anonymity." Carla was already reaching for her phone. "I'm calling the state police." "And tell them what? That we think a billionaire kidnapped our friend based on security footage of a random SUV?" Carla hesitated, knowing Sarah was right. Without concrete evidence, the authorities wouldn't take action against someone with Kessler's resources. Back at the warehouse, Tank's men were preparing to move Emily when his phone rang again. His expression darkened as he listened. What do you mean there's a problem? How many people know? Are you certain it's contained? Emily watched his face, seeing cracks in his professional composure for the first time. Sir, with respect, maybe we should consider— Yes, sir. I understand. He ended the call and turned to his men. New directive. We don't have time for offshore disposal. Handle this locally and make it look like an accident. What kind of accident? One of them asked. Car went off the mountain road. Driver fell asleep, lost control. Happens all the time on those curves. Emily's heart hammered as they prepared to untie her from the chair. Once they got her in a car, her chances of survival dropped to 0. Wait, she said. The upload, it's still running. Tank glanced at her laptop, noticing the blinking LED for the first time. What upload? While you were outside making calls, my laptop finished uploading everything to a secure server. The confession video, the financial records, all of it. Tank's face went white. He lunged for the laptop and smashed it. Too late, Emily said quietly. Tank's phone immediately started ringing. Kessler's panicked voice carried clearly in the sudden silence. The servers just went active. Every major news outlet is receiving anonymous packages. How did this happen? Tank stared at Emily in the darkness, realizing that the quiet housekeeper had just checkmated them all. Tank's phone continued ringing as emergency lighting flickered on in the warehouse. Kessler's panicked voice crackled through the speaker when Tank finally answered. Every news outlet in the country just received a data package. CNN, Fox, Washington Post, they all have it. How did she— She had a backup system we didn't detect, Tank said, his professional calm cracking. The upload completed while we were— I don't care about excuses. Fix this. Call your contacts. Threaten the editors. Buy the story if you have to. Tank looked at Emily, who sat perfectly still in her chair, despite the chaos erupting around her. Sir, with respect, once this many outlets have the material simultaneously, suppression becomes impossible. Then we move to containment. Discredit the source, claim it's deepfake technology, hire the best crisis management firm and— James. Tank's use of Kessler's first name sent a chill through the warehouse. There's a confession video. Your confession. You admitting to 23 separate incidents of assault and cover-up. The silence on the phone stretched for long seconds. Destroy everything. The girl, the equipment, any trace this ever happened. Sir, that won't change what's already been released. I don't care. She humiliated me. She has to pay. Tank exchanged glances with his men, recognizing the shift from calculated damage control to emotional revenge. In his experience, that's when employers became liabilities. Sir, I strongly advise. You work for me. Do what I'm paying you to do. Tank ended the call and stood in the flickering emergency lighting, weighing his options. 23 years of cleaning up messes for wealthy clients had taught him when to cut losses and when to double down. Boss, one of his men asked, what's the play? Tank studied Emily's face, seeing not fear, but quiet determination, the same expression he'd seen on soldiers who'd already made peace with dying for their cause. Ma'am, he said finally, you've created quite a situation. I've exposed the truth. That's not a situation. That's justice. Justice. Tank seemed to taste the word. I've been in this business long enough to know that justice and survival rarely align. He pulled out a knife and approached her chair. Emily braced herself, but instead of attacking, he cut the zip ties binding her wrists. Sir? His men looked confused. Gentlemen, we're in uncharted territory. Our employer just became a public liability, and continuing to work for him puts us all at risk. Tank stepped back as Emily rubbed circulation back into her hands. Ms. Watson, you've won. The question now is, what happens next? What do you mean? I mean, James Kessler is finished. His confession is spreading across every network. His company's stock is in free fall, and federal prosecutors are probably drafting indictments as we speak. Tank holstered his weapon. But a cornered billionaire with nothing left to lose is extremely dangerous. Kessler's voice echoed from Tank's phone as another call came through. Tank declined it. He's not going to accept defeat gracefully, Tank continued. He'll spend his remaining resources trying to hurt you, your friends, anyone connected to this situation. So, what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we end this properly. Tank's expression hardened, one way or another. Meanwhile, across the country, newsrooms erupted into activity as editors reviewed the explosive evidence package. The confession video played on secure monitors, while journalists verified financial records and legal documents. At CNN headquarters, the senior producer called an emergency meeting. Legal has reviewed everything. It's authentic. We're looking at the biggest corporate scandal since Enron. Similar scenes played out at news outlets nationwide as the story that would destroy James. Kessler built momentum. Back at the warehouse, Tank's phone rang again. This time, he answered on speaker. Tank, where are you? I'm flying in to handle this personally. Sir, I don't think that's wise. The FBI will be looking for you within hours. Let them look. I own half the judges in this district. Kessler's voice was becoming increasingly unhinged. Bring me the girl. I want to look her in the eyes when she realizes what she's caused herself. Tank met Emily's gaze across the warehouse floor. In that moment, both of them understood that the situation had moved beyond professional obligation into personal survival. Sir, Tank said carefully, perhaps you should focus on legal representation rather than bring her to the airfield. That's an order. The call ended, leaving Tank and his team staring at Emily in the emergency lighting. He's coming here, isn't he? She asked. Worse. He wants to meet you at his private airfield. Tank's expression was grim. A man with his resources, feeling cornered and humiliated. This isn't going to end with legal proceedings. Emily stood up slowly, understanding that her victory had just become a death sentence. James Kessler was coming to settle the score personally. The private airfield sat in darkness 20 minutes from the warehouse. Its single runway was illuminated by scattered lights that created an eerie checkerboard pattern across the tarmac. Kessler's Gulfstream waited like a sleeping predator, engines cold but ready. Tank drove in silence while Emily sat in the passenger seat, no longer restrained. The dynamic had shifted completely. She was no longer his prisoner, but rather a fellow survivor in a situation spiraling beyond anyone's control. He's going to try to kill me, she said quietly. Probably. The question is whether you're going to let him. Emily studied Tank's profile in the dashboard lights. Why are you helping me? I'm not helping you. I'm protecting myself. Tank's voice was matter of fact. 23 years of cleaning up messes for wealthy psychopaths taught me when to cut ties. Your little confession video just made Kessler radioactive. So, what's your plan? Survive the next hour. Everything else is negotiable. Meanwhile, high above the Montana mountains, Kessler paced the cabin of his private jet like a caged animal. The flight attendant had retreated to the galley after witnessing his increasing agitation, and the pilots maintained radio silence except for essential communications. His phone buzzed constantly with calls from lawyers, board members, and crisis management specialists. He ignored them all. The confession video was spreading across social media faster than any legal team could contain it. Stock prices were cratering. Federal prosecutors were undoubtedly preparing arrest warrants. But none of that mattered now. The only thing that mattered was making the housekeeper pay for her audacity. He pulled up the news coverage on his tablet, watching his own face confess to decades of abuse. The sound quality was perfect, the video resolution crystal clear. No amount of money could make this disappear. Sir, the pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. We're beginning our descent to the private airfield. Good. Have ground crew standing by, but keep the engines running. Sir, if you're planning another departure, I should mention that the FAA has been making inquiries about Just keep the engines running. Back on the ground, Tank parked near the airfield's single hangar and studied the approaching aircraft's lights. He's coming in hot. No standard approach pattern. Emily watched the Gulf Stream descend through the darkness. What happens when he lands? That depends on how crazy he's willing to get. Tank checked his weapon. Billionaires aren't used to losing. When they do, they sometimes make very poor decisions. The jet touched down with a screech of tires, taxiing aggressively toward the hangar. It stopped 50 yards away, engines still. Running, passenger door already opening. Kessler emerged alone, his usual polished appearance replaced by something feral. His suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his eyes wild with rage and desperation. "Where is she?" he shouted across the tarmac. Tank stepped out of the car, hands visible but ready. "Sir, I strongly recommend you get back on that plane and leave the country while you still can." "I asked you a question." Kessler's voice cracked with hysteria. "Where is the girl who destroyed my life?" Emily opened the passenger door and stood up, facing the man who'd started this nightmare. "I'm right here, James." The use of his first name sent him into a rage. "You have no idea what you've done. My company, my reputation, my family, all of it destroyed by some nobody housekeeper. I exposed the truth about what you did to 23 women. That's not destruction. That's justice." "Justice?" Kessler laughed, a sound devoid of sanity. "I built an empire. I created jobs, funded research, advanced technology. And you think the word of some cleaning lady matters? Your own words matter. Your own confession." Kessler's face contorted with fury as he reached into his jacket. Tank tensed, recognizing the movement, but Kessler's hand emerged holding a phone instead of a weapon. "You want to see what real power looks like?" Kessler's thumbs flew across the screen. "I just authorized a wire transfer to 3 different criminal organizations, $500,000 each, to put bounties on you, your roommate, and that security guard who helped you." Emily felt ice in her veins. Sarah, Carla, innocent people who'd tried to help her. "Even if I die tonight," Kessler continued, "you'll spend the rest of your short life looking over your shoulder. Everyone you care about will pay the price for your arrogance." Tank stepped forward, his patience finally exhausted. "Sir, you need to calm down and think rationally." "Don't tell me to calm down." Kessler spun toward his former employee. "You failed me. All of you failed me. The one job you had was to keep some uppity maid from destroying everything I built." The Gulf Stream's engines continued their steady whine. As the 3 figures faced each other on the dark tarmac, above them, the first hints of dawn touched the eastern mountains, but none of them noticed the approaching light. This was going to end here, one way or another. Kessler's hand moved toward his jacket with deadly intent. "You think any of this is personal? This is business, power, control?" He pulled out a pistol, his hands shaking with fury. "And I will not be brought down by some nobody." Tank drew his own weapon but hesitated, caught between professional loyalty and self-preservation. The sound of approaching vehicles cut through the night. Multiple engines, moving fast. "What the hell?" Kessler spun toward the sound as headlights flooded the airfield. 3 black SUVs screeched to a halt around the hangar, disgorging FBI agents in tactical gear. Red laser dots immediately painted both Kessler and Tank as snipers took position. "Federal agents, drop your weapons." Kessler's face went white as he realized the scope of his miscalculation. "This is impossible. I own people in James Kessler. You're under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, and witness intimidation." The lead agent's voice boomed across the tarmac through a megaphone. Behind the federal vehicles, Emily spotted a familiar SUV. Carla and Sarah emerged, staying close to the FBI agents who'd clearly brought them as witnesses. "How did they find us?" Tank demanded, his weapon still drawn but lowered. Sarah's voice carried across the airfield. "We called them hours ago. Emily sent us evidence before she disappeared. The pieces clicked together in Kessler's mind. You set this up. The whole thing was a trap. No, Emily said, stepping away from both armed men. You set this up the moment you decided to assault me. Everything after that was just consequences. Marcus Thompson, drop your weapon. The FBI had identified Tank from their databases. You're also under arrest for kidnapping and conspiracy. Tank looked around at the tactical positions surrounding him, calculating odds that didn't exist. 23 years of criminal work was about to catch up with him, whether he cooperated or not. Sir, he called to Kessler, I strongly advise surrender. Surrender? Kessler's voice cracked with hysteria. Do you know what prison will do to someone like me? I won't survive a week. You should have thought of that before you assaulted. 23 women, Emily said coldly. Kessler's rage boiled over. He raised his pistol toward her, finger tightening on the trigger. If I'm going down, you're coming with me. The FBI sniper shot was instantaneous and precise, striking Kessler's shoulder and spinning him to the ground. His weapon skittered across the asphalt as agents swarmed forward. Tank immediately dropped his gun and raised his hands. I surrender. I want to make a deal. As federal agents secured the scene, Sarah broke away from the perimeter and ran toward Emily. Are you okay? We thought they were going to kill you. Emily embraced her roommate, feeling the weight of the last few days finally lifting from her shoulders. How did you know where to find me? Carla approached, grinning despite the chaos. Your laptop had GPS tracking enabled. Plus, I may have kept a few more security recordings than I mentioned. The FBI agent explained as medics worked on the wounded billionaire. We've been monitoring Kessler's communications for months. Your evidence gave us everything we needed for arrests. But when his people grabbed you, it became a kidnapping case. Kessler was loaded onto a stretcher, conscious but defeated. As they wheeled him past Emily, he made one final attempt at intimidation. This isn't over. I have resources you can't imagine. People who... Mr. Kessler, the FBI agent interrupted. Your assets have been frozen. Your associates are being arrested nationwide. And you're facing life in federal prison. It's very much over. As the ambulance doors closed on James Kessler, Emily watched the man who'd terrorized her disappear into custody. Tank was already in handcuffs, bargaining desperately with prosecutors for a reduced sentence. The quiet housekeeper had brought down a billionaire's criminal empire, using nothing but courage, intelligence, and the support of friends who refused to let her fight alone. Justice, finally, had been served. 6 months later, Emily sat in the sunlit cafe of a small college town in Vermont, watching snow fall outside the window while she graded papers from her criminal justice course. The transition from housekeeper to adjunct professor had been surreal, but the $5 million from Kessler's accounts had bought her both freedom and opportunity. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Former tech CEO James Kessler sentenced to 45 years in federal prison. She read the article with quiet satisfaction. The judge had called his crimes a systematic campaign of terror against vulnerable women and noted that his lack of remorse warranted the maximum sentence. Marcus "Tank" Thompson had received 20 years after his cooperation led to the arrests of 12 other criminals in Kessler's network. The confession video had become Exhibit A in the largest racketeering case in tech industry history. Professor Watson, a student, approached her table hesitantly. I wanted to thank you for your lecture on institutional power. It really opened my eyes about how systems protect perpetrators. That's exactly why we study these cases, Emily replied. Understanding how abuse of power works is the first step in preventing it. After the student left, Emily returned to her grading, but was interrupted by a familiar voice. Mind if I sit? Carla Rodriguez looked different in civilian clothes. Relaxed, confident, no longer carrying the weight of watching corruption. I was in the area for my new job interview, Carla explained, settling into the opposite chair. Head of security for a women's shelter. Figured I'd use my skills for something worthwhile. How's Sarah doing? Thriving. She's the head housekeeper. At Aspen Heights now. Peterson got fired when the FBI investigation revealed how deep the cover-ups went. New management actually cares about staff safety. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the snow accumulate on the campus quad. Two women whose lives had been forever changed by one night's decision to stand up against injustice. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you just stayed quiet?" Carla asked. Emily considered the question. "Sometimes. But then I think about Rachel Kim, Maria Alvarez, Jennifer Brooks, and all the others. Their voices matter more than my comfort ever did." The Victims' Compensation Fund hit $12 million last week, Carla reported. Between Kessler's seized assets and the class action settlement, every woman he hurt is finally getting some measure of justice. Money can't undo trauma, but it can provide therapy, education, fresh starts. Emily smiled. Some of them are using it to go to law school, others to start advocacy organizations. Power redistributed to the people who needed it most. Carla's expression grew serious. Any regrets? Only one, that it took so long for someone to stop him. As evening approached, Carla departed for her hotel, leaving Emily alone with her thoughts and her papers. She'd built a new life from the ashes of the old one, teaching students about justice, supporting survivors through her foundation, living without fear for the first time in years. Her laptop chimed with an email from a former Synapse employee. "Professor Watson, I saw your interview about institutional courage. Your story gave me the strength to report my supervisor's harassment. The company fired him yesterday. Thank you for showing us that we don't have to stay silent." Emily closed her laptop and gathered her materials, feeling the deep satisfaction that came from work that mattered. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in pristine white. A fresh start, clean and full of possibility. The quiet housekeeper had found her voice, and in doing so, had helped countless others find theirs. Justice, once begun, creates its own momentum. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.